You've probably watched a baseball game, whether it is a Yankees game or a Dodgers game, or even you've heard your friends talk about baseball, and you probably thought in your mind, I have no idea what's happening here, and I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, if that's you, then you are in luck because I am going to teach you everything that you need to know about baseball, from the rules to the people involved and everything in between. I want to make sure that you close the knowledge gap and eventually make you a baseball fan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the brand new series, Ball Talk 101. My name is Chanel, and today we will talk about baseball, also known as America's sports or America's pastime. Since we have spring training and the regular season coming up relatively soon, I want to make sure that you have all the information that you need to get ready for the upcoming season. Now, just as a side note, Ball Talk 101 is not just about baseball. Ball Talk 101 is a whole book series that will be covering other sports from football to basketball to even soccer, just to name a few. So, new chapters of Ball Talk 101 will be released every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, if you don't want to miss a single episode, then please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and be sure to turn on notifications. And if you enjoy this video, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up so I can continue to make these types of videos. Also, too, this video will be available on my Spotify. So you can check out the description box down below where that'll give you the link to my Spotify. And this video is available on Patreon, and that is for free too. So if you go to patreon.com/ball talk with Chanel, you can sign up for free, and also too, you can have access to these videos. Now, if you also check out the description box down below, it'll give you all of my social media accounts, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, my Threads, my X account, where those are the platforms where I post daily about the latest news and scores that's happening in sports. And then you can also check out the Snapchat where you will get a behind the scenes of what my life is currently like. And then on top of that, you also get access to my newsletter. Now, the goal of my newsletter is for you to have all the biggest news that's happened in sports straight to your inbox, quick, easy, to the point. My goal is so that way you can get through this newsletter in 10 minutes. Oh, and also too, this newsletter is completely free. So be sure to click on the link in the description box to subscribe to the newsletter so you can stay caught up in sports. So now with all that being said, take out your pen and paper and let's get started with chapter 1, the introduction to baseball. Now this chapter is going to be split into 5 sections. In the first section, we are going to be talking about the history of baseball. How did baseball become the multi-billion sport that it is today? Then we're going to shift over and talk about how the league is divided because you cannot understand a lot of the future chapters, especially the scheduling, which we'll be talking about in chapter 2, if you don't understand how the league is divided. So we are going to be spending some time talking about that. Then in section 3, we will be talking about the basic setup of a baseball field so that way you understand what I am referring to in future chapters. Then section 4 will give you a summary of what we have learned in this chapter. Think of this as your Spark Notes, your Cliff Notes version of this entire episode. And then this chapter will conclude with a 5-question quiz that will test you on your knowledge on today's episode. So starting off with section 1, the history of baseball. How exactly did baseball become the sport that it is today? Now with this section, I will try to make this as brief as possible. So baseball, as we know, it dates back all the way to 1744, where this was mentioned in a children's book back in England, and then made its way over to the 13 colonies, aka currently the United States. Now let's fast forward to 1845, where the city of New York created what's called the New York Knickerbocker Baseball Club, which this led to the increase in the popularity of the sport. Now at that time, Boston had their own version of the game, where they used a softball instead of a hardball. However, after the Civil War, so you're talking around 1865 to 1866, New York became the predominant game. This game expanded to states such as Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and even all the way out to Oregon. Players at this time were starting to specialize in different positions, so that's how you get the positions today. And then players were getting compensated, of course, not as much as players are getting paid today, or they were actually compensated with a job that required little to no work. Now, fast forward to 1881, and this is when the American Association was formed. Now, this league comprised of teams that were expelled from the National League at that point for whatever reason it may be. And now this league was created to rival the National League. Well, unfortunately, this league failed and it ended up merging with the National League. However, let's fast forward to 1893, and that was when the Western League was formed, which was then renamed to the American League, which of course still exists today. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century. In 1903, we have the first World Series that was ever played. Then we fast forward to 1919, and that was when players were accused of throwing the 1919 World Series, and they were part of the Chicago White Sox. And then all of those members ended up getting banned from the sport. Then we shift over to the 1920s, which is considered the quote unquote golden age of baseball. Now, at that time, you had the Major League Baseball, which was only comprised of white players. You had the minor leagues, which of course still exist today, and we will talk about the minor leagues in detail in a future chapter. And then you also had the Negro League, which was also a league that was created for non-white players. However, in 1947, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. He was the first black player to play in Major League Baseball. He played at that time for the Brooklyn Dodgers, who are now the LA Dodgers. And after he played in Major League Baseball, that was when the Negro League ceased to exist. And now Jackie Robinson's number is retired by the entire league. And fun fact, he is the only player to have his number retired by the entire league, aka no other player can wear number 42 because that is the number reserved for Jackie Robinson. And then we fast forward, and that's when we get the divisions created. That is when you get more teams, and that's what ultimately created the sport that it is today. Okay, so now you have a brief history of how Major League Baseball came to be what it is today. Now let's move on to the next section and talk about how exactly the league is divided. So keep in mind that in Major League Baseball, there are 30 total teams. So like I said before, keep that in mind. We are going to make a note over here. Now, within Major League Baseball, there are two separate leagues, like we talked about in the last section. There is the American League, which will be noted as AL, and you also have the National League, which is noted as NL. Now, like I said beforehand, there are 30 total teams in Major League Baseball, and there isn't a team that is not part of one of these leagues. So, what this means is that there are 15 teams in each league. Now, within these leagues, there are what's called divisions, and there are three divisions in each of these leagues. There is the East, the Central, and the West. Now, of course, with each league having 15 teams, there isn't a team that is not part of a division, which means that each division has 5 teams. Now, the way you would talk about, the way you would say these divisions is that you would first say the league that it is in, and then you would say the division that you were talking about. Confused? It's okay. I understand. Let's actually run through this as an example, okay? So let's start first with the American League. So we're going to ignore the National League for now. Now, like I said, within the American League, there's the East Division, there's the Central Division, there's the West Division. So let's start first with the American League East Division. Now you can see exactly what I'm talking about, where in order to say the division, you have to start first with the league that you were talking about, which in this case is the American League. And then you talk about the division that you are referring to, which is the East Division. So the 5 teams that are part of the American League East Division are the Toronto Blue Jays, the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles, and the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, the 5 teams that are in the American League Central Division are the Cleveland Guardians, the Detroit Tigers, the Kansas City Royals, the Minnesota Twins, and the Chicago White Sox. And last but not least, the 5 teams that are in the American League West Division are the Houston Astros, the Texas Rangers, the Seattle Mariners, the Oakland Athletics, also known as the Oakland A's, and the Los Angeles Angels, also known as the LA Angels. So those are the teams that are in the American League. Now let's move on to the National League. So I want to start first with the National League East Division. So again, like I said beforehand, in order to say the division, you want to start first with the league that you are talking about, which in this case is the National League. And then you want to talk about the division that you want to talk about, which in this case is the East Division. So the 5 teams that are in the National League East Division are the Philadelphia Phillies, the New York Mets, the Miami Marlins, the Atlanta Braves, and the Washington Nationals. So the 5 teams that are in the National League Central Division are the Milwaukee Brewers, the Chicago Cubs, the Cincinnati Reds, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And last but not least, the 5 teams that are in the National League West Division are the Los Angeles Dodgers, also known as the LA Dodgers, the San Diego Padres, the San Francisco Giants, the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the Colorado Rockies. Now, here's what I'm going to say. Do you have to memorize which division every single team belongs to at this very moment? No. You do not need to memorize this. The purpose of me telling you what division they are in is so that way you have an understanding of how the league is divided. Where each team belongs to and what league and what division they belong to, that is something that you will learn over time as you watch more and more baseball. But right now, it is not important that you have to memorize this. That is not the point of this. The point of this is so that way you can see how the league is structured. You can see how the league is divided. So now with all that being said, now let's look at the basic setup of a baseball field. So fair warning. There are going to be a lot of topics here that you may not understand, that you may not know, and that you're very confused. I understand that. What I want you to get out of this section is I want you to understand the basic setup of a baseball field. Okay? All of the topics that you don't understand, we will go over in future chapters. But right now, I just want you to see what the field looks like. So let's look at it right over here. Now, you see these white lines that are over here? This is called the foul line. This is what determines whether the ball is in play or if it is out or if it is a foul ball. Okay. Now, you can see here that the field is also divided into 2 quote unquote sections that you can think of it as. You have the outfield that's over here, and usually you'll know that it's the outfield because it's just covered in grass or turf, whatever baseball game that you are playing, right? Depends on whether they're playing on grass or whether they're playing on turf. Then over here, what you'll see is the infield. Okay. Now you see these 4 little white squares and stuff over here. These are called bases. This is where the runner needs to step on. And you can see, like I said, there are 4 bases. First base, second base, third base, and home base. This section over here is called the pitcher's mound. This is where the pitcher will be throwing the ball to the batter. And then right over here next to home base, what you will see is a box over here. This is called the batter's box. This is where the batter has to stand when he is getting ready to swing. So with that, now let's summarize everything that you have learned in this chapter. First, you learned the history of baseball, how baseball dates back all the way to 1744, but the professional aspect of baseball did not occur until 1845. You learned that in the 1900s, especially in the 1920s, you saw the Major League Baseball, you saw the Minor League Baseball, and you also saw the Negro League that does not exist today. You learned that Jackie Robinson is the first Black player to play in Major League Baseball. You learned that he is the only player in Major League Baseball to have his number retired by the entire league. Then we went over how the league is divided. We went over how there are 2 leagues, the American League and the National League. And within each league, there are 3 divisions, the East, the Central, and the West. We also learned that the way you would say the division is you would say the league that it's in first, and then you would say the division. And then last but not least, you learned about the basic setup of a baseball field, from the outfield to the infield to the bases. So now you will move on to the last section, which will be a 5-question quiz that will test your knowledge on today's chapter. And then I will see you in chapter 2, where we will be talking about the MLB schedule.